All right, so for the first part of this video, I'm going to show you a very unproductive workflow. It's a typical workflow where you start changing up your CSS, you start changing up some JavaScript, you have to reload your browser, you have to minify your code, you have to concatenate your files, and often you have to do this manually. But that's very unproductive because that takes a significant amount of time. And then I'm going to show you a better way by using Gulp and automation tools. This will streamline your workflow, it'll make you a much more productive developer, and it'll save you a significant amount of time. And if you want to jump around to specific parts, there's a table of contents down below in the description area. So definitely check that out. And the code in this video, I'll be sharing that code on my website, pixelweb.com. I'll leave a link down below to that article. All right, so let's jump into this unproductive workflow first, and then I'll show you how to use Gulp to automate the entire process. All right, so now I got to change the color over here of the nav bar. Let me see where that's located at. Let me find it. All right, so now let's say I want to make this red. Let me do this. Save it. I'm going to reload the browser now, and it's red. All right, now let me see, to scroll to top. Maybe I want that to be a little bit faster, so let me go over here, open up the file. Let me have that animate up in 200 milliseconds. Save the file, reload. All right, so that's better. It's a little bit faster, but maybe it's too fast. Reload the browser again. All right, so that's about right. Maybe I don't like it being red, so let me go back over here. Let me take this out. Reload the browser. All right, so it's back to black. All right, so now let me see something. I want to see how many files am I calling in here. All right, so I have my bootstrap file, I have the prism file, I have the style.css, I have jQuery, but that's being called in by WordPress itself. Scroll down to the bottom. Then I have the bootstrap bundle, my hover effect, because I have a custom hover effect for bootstrap itself, which is not standard. To scroll to top, I have the prism library. That's for the embedded code. I have the resize sensor, skip link focus, sticky sidebar, and then the helper class for the sticky sidebar as well. That's a lot of files. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then go up here. 9, 10, 11 files that I'm calling in. Let me see. Let me go right here. Let's see what Google says about minification of files. Because if we go over here, this file, it's not minified. Now it says you should minify your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript. So how do we do that? All right, let's try this one. I'm going to grab this whole file, then minify. Now I'm going to select all, copy. And then I would have to replace it here. But then I have to do the same thing for every single file, for my JavaScript files and for all my CSS files. Now that takes some time. And then on top of that, I should probably combine all my files, because if we go over here, this is an analysis of HTTP performance and problems. All right, so time. So we have the connection established, latency and bandwidth, and scalability issues. All right, so now if we go back here, I'm going to pull this out. Let me go to network. Let me reload. And now we see all the files that we loaded. And we made about 28 requests within that. That's a lot. We should combine our files and make this faster. But how do we do that? And how do we increase our productivity as a coder, as a developer? You know, time is money. And quite frankly, I don't have all the time in the world. So I got to get this done as fast as possible. There's gotta be a better way. Now this is a project that automates and enhances your workflow as a web developer. Now what can we do with this? All right, so there has to be a better way to get this done, right? I mean, we have to improve our productivity. We have to get our code generated as fast as possible. You know, reloading the browser every time we make a change might not seem like a big deal at first, but now if you calculate each time you reload that browser over the course of a day, a week, a month, and even a year, you're gonna find you spend a lot of time clicking away. And then if we want to minify our code, whether it's the CSS or the JavaScript, if we want to concatenate our files, and if we want to compress our images, all that takes time. That's where NodeJS and Gulp come into play. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use Gulp 4, which is the latest version of Gulp that you could use. And I'm going to show you some of the plugins like browser sync. I'm going to show you auto prefixer. I'm going to show you how to use concat. I'm going to show you how to use SASS for better CSS optimization and maintenance. I'm going to show you how to use Uglify to minify your JavaScript code. And I'm going to show you how to use SourceMaps as well. Now, this is an update. I've done videos like this in the past, but those were for version 3.9. And now some of the way we did things in the past are no longer the recommended way to get it done, especially since we're upgrading to Gulp 4.0. All right, so let's jump back on the computer and I'm going to show you how to actually implement this and streamline your workflow as a web developer. Let's do this. And in order to do that, let me go over here. We're going to be using Gulp. All right, so how do we actually use this? Let me go back to my code editor. I'm going to X out of this right there, and I'll X out of that one. Now I'm using Visual Studio Code, and I'm using this text editor because it already has a bunch of built-in functionality that makes it even easier for me to code. VS Code is one of the preferred and most widely used text editors that give you a lot of IDE type functionality. But if you want to use something different like Sublime Text or Atom.io, those are also great options. But if we go over here to my functions.php file, we see that I'm calling in a couple of files. My Bootstrap file, Prism, my style.css file. I have my JavaScript files over here. That's a lot of files. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to open up my command prompt or my command line. And I'm doing that right within Visual Studio Code. Now let me show you how to get to there real quick. Go to here, View, click on Terminal, and you'll see it right there. Or you could use a keyboard shortcut right here. All right, so there's a couple of things you need if you don't already have it installed on your system. So you're going to need Node. So type out node -- version to see what version of Node you have installed. If you don't have Node already installed, then go here to the browser. Go to nodejs.org. And I recommend downloading the 10.15.0 LTS. This is the one for long-term support and is recommended for most users. You might have a different version number depending on when you're viewing this video. But what you'll do is you'll download the version for your operating system and then you'll follow the prompts in order to install it. And when you install Node, you also get the Node Package Manager. What is that? It's NPM for short. The Node Package Manager is the package manager for Node. And this is where we're going to get our plugins for Gulp. So we'll go back to our editor. I'm going to type out npm -- version just to make sure I have the right version that I need. We're good there. Now, if you've been running Gulp in the past, like if we go here and I'll type out Gulp -- version again. And it tells me that I have the CLI version 2.0.1. Now, if you have something different, you're going to want to remove Gulp or the previous version from your operating system. So that way you can start off from scratch. So to do that, let me clear the screen. Let me make the screen go to the top. What you would do is type out npm, which is the Node Package Manager, then type out a space, and then rm for remove, space, -- global, space, Gulp. You'll hit enter or return and it'll remove Gulp from your system. All right, so that's the first thing. So we're going to start off from scratch. Again, you're going to want to make sure you have Node installed in your system. And you're going to also want to check the NPM that you have installed. I'll remove Gulp globally from my system here. Again, that's using npm space remove space -- global space Gulp. Okay, so again, the command is for Node to check the version. And then for npm. And now what we're going to want to do is install Gulp on the command line. So we're going to type out npm. So what we're doing here is we're installing Gulp globally, the Gulp CLI. So that's npm space install space -- global space Gulp -CLI. Hit enter. It'll start the process of installing it. And then we're going to want to make a directory where Gulp is going to live within our project folder. So we see here that I'm within my themes folder right here. If I do an ls-l, we see what I have installed here already. These are the various themes. So you could type out make dir for make directory, dev-gulp. Then if we do an ls again, we now see we have the dev-gulp folder right there. And if we go here, we see we have the folder there. If you don't want to do that via the command line, you could always just create a folder within your file explorer or within the text editor itself. Let me clear the screen. Now what I want to do is change my directory into that folder. So I'm going to type out cd, then dev-g, and then I'll tab it. It'll autocomplete to dev-gulp. Then I'll hit return. And now we see I'm in that folder. If I do an ls-lah, we see I only have the current directory and the directory above it. Now what you can do is you can type out npm init, and this will walk you through the process of creating your package.json file. So for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to press enter for everything. I'll type out yes, hit enter, and now if we do ls-lah again, we now see we have the package.json file. If I go over here, this is what it installed right there, or the file that it created. So you can give it a description if you want, and you can fine tune some of the information here. But what I'm going to do for this one is I'm just going to delete that section there because I don't need that. You put in your author name. This is the license. You can leave it to the ISC license, or you could use a GPL license, whichever one you want to have used. So I'll save that. Let's say for the description, I'll type out Gulp demonstration. Now the next thing I want to do, let me go over here. I'll clear the screen just to get to the top, make that easier to see. I'm going to type out npm install save-dev gulp. All right, so we have npm space install space --save-dev space gulp. Hit enter, return, and let's see what happens to our package.json file. It's going to run through its process. And once it's done, you're going to get this message down here, added 318 packages from 218 contributors and audited 6,376 packages in 17.548 seconds. And no vulnerabilities found. And you see that it created this line over here and the dev dependencies section. Now if we go over here, let me type out gulp space -- version. And we see the CLI version that we have installed, and we also see the local version that we have installed as well. All right, let me install another plugin over here. Now what I want to do is every time I make a change to a file, whether it's PHP or CSS or JavaScript or whatever, I want the browser window to automatically reload when I hit save. So in order to do that, we're going to need browser sync. So I'll type out, actually what I'll do is I'll hit the up arrow, because this is the line that we're going to be using for the most part. npm space install space --save-dev, and then it's going to be the package that we want. Now we're going to be installing a lot of files, and there's a easier way to get everything installed simultaneously, but I'll just do it one by one. So I'm typing out browser sync over here. I'll hit enter. And now we see installed browser sync. It installed 160 packages, and there's no vulnerabilities. And you see that we have browser sync over here. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to install another package, and this one's going to be for Auto Prefixer. Now, Auto Prefixer is a way for you to make sure that with the CSS that you write, if a browser prefix is going to be needed, it'll automatically insert it for you. This is going to be working in conjunction with SASS, and we're going to be using SourceMaps as well. But this is going to save you time because you're not going to have to go into the browser, go to the website Can I Use, and to verify whether or not you can use a specific CSS property or if there's a prefix that you have to use. This will do it for you. So now what I'll do is I'll go here, I'll press the up arrow. Now for this one, I'm going to type out Gulp-Auto Prefixer. Press enter. And now we see we have that installed. I'll clear the screen. Now the next plugin I'm going to install, let me go back this way, is called Gulp Change. Then we're going to be using this whenever we change our image sizes, or if we're going to use any new images. We're only going to want to have Gulp process it if it's changed. So I'll type out changed over here. So it's the same code or the same line. npm space install space dash dash save dash dev space gulp dash changed. Hit enter, and now that's installed. Let me go to the next one. Now this one's going to be gulp dash clean dash css. Now what this is going to do is help minify our CSS files itself. Again, we want to minify those files to compress them and make them perform better within a browser. Now we see we have that installed. Now the next one we're going to install is gulp concat. And this is going to concatenate our CSS files and our JavaScript files. So it'll take all those CSS files that we had and all those JavaScript files, and it'll make one CSS file and one JavaScript file. Now the benefit of that is that it'll reduce the amount of HTTP requests that's being made, which will make your website and web page load faster. And that's important. So we're going to use gulp-concat for that. And now we see we have that there. Now the next one is for compression of our images. Now I have a couple of other tools that I could use, like JPEG Mini. We can go to a couple of websites where we upload the images, it'll compress it for us, then we'll download the image and then put it where we need to put it. But that's a process and we're trying to save time. So for that, I'm going to install gulp-ImageMin. And now we see we have that there as well. All right, so let me clear the screen again. Now, if you're working on different types of systems, like I work on Windows, I work on Linux, and I work on Mac OS. I'll explain why in another video, but ultimately it's because I want to be able to understand how to develop on each operating system. So it's my crazy workflow. But the line endings for Windows and Linux and Mac OS are different. So we're going to want to make sure that we have consistent line endings. So for that, we're going to use the gulp line ending corrector. So we're going to type that out like that, then hit enter and let it run its process. All right, so now we have that there. All right, the next one we're going to be using is the SASS plugin itself. So we'll type out gulp-SASS. Now this is for working with our CSS files. Instead of working on one file that can get crazy long, we're going to be using SASS and we're going to break apart our CSS file into sections. So that way it's easier to maintain. And then Gulp will process it and then it'll create the CSS file for us, the end result. All right, so we see now we have Gulp SASS installed. All right, so the next one is going to be for SourceMaps, because if you're working with SASS and you're going to start using your developer tools within Chrome or Firefox, you're going to want to identify where that file that you're actually going to change the code is located. By default, you'll see the style sheet that you're using when you load your project. But you're not going to change it in your main style sheet. You're going to change any CSS within the SASS files designated for that code. And you'll see that in a moment, and I'll show you that. But we're going to want to install Gulp SourceMaps in order to make sure that we can identify the location of those files. So you'll type out Gulp-SourceMaps and hit enter or return. And now we have that there. Now, Gulp does have some source map features already built into it by default, but if you want to get more advanced usage out of it, you still need to use a plugin. All right, so the last one we're going to be using in this demonstration is Uglify. Now what this does, it minifies your JavaScript code, and that's going to be important as well. So you just type out Gulp-Uglify, then hit enter or return. And now we see we have that done. All right, so what now? Now we have to create another file within our folder right here. But real quick, if you notice within the dev-gulp folder, you now have the node modules. And these are all the modules that you installed with the various Gulp plugins themselves. Now you can take a look at what this is doing. You can look at each file, but there's a lot going on within this folder. We have our package-lock.json file, and we have our package.json file right there. You're never going to touch this file. You leave it the way it is. You'll be working with this file if you want to make any changes. And what's good is that if you're going to be porting this to another project, you don't have to go through all that npm install stuff, or even the npm init. What you could do is take the package.json file, copy the whole entire file to another project, rename it if you need to, save it, and then you could just click on your terminal area, and then you could do something like npm install, and it'll install all those plugins that you have within your package.json file. You just have to make sure you're within the same folder that the package.json file is at. So that's a fast way to get this done. But I wanted to show you the longer way so that way you see what's actually happening. All right, so now we have this file. So what we're going to do here, make sure you're within your dev-gulp folder. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it Gulpfile.js. Now this is what we're going to have to be working with. I'm going to close off the terminal window for now. But basically what we're going to do is create some JavaScript within the Gulp file. And that's what Gulp is going to process. So if we go over here real quick, close that off, we go here, we see the files that I currently have. I do already have a SASS folder, and I'm using my DevWP WordPress training theme for this demonstration. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take all your CSS and the various sections, like you have your typography, your elements, your forms, your navigation, things of that nature. You'll take all those sections, you would cut it out of your style.css file, and then you would create a folder within a SASS folder, and you would paste it within those sections. And this is going to make your code more modular. So again, you go to the various sections of your CSS file, your main one, you take those sections out, you'll create another folder within your folder structure. In this case, it's called SASS. And then you will create different sections. Like I have one here for elements, one for forms, one for the maps itself, one for media, mix-ins, modules, navigation, etc. Typography. So now I know that if I want to change something within or with media, I can go over here and I can open up the various files that I have to open up. Make the changes here, and when I process my project with Gulp, it'll automatically place the code within the style.css file. So again, just to recap, with SASS, we're going to be taking our CSS code and making it modular by creating another folder and subfolders if we need to, and placing the code in those sections. So if you see here in the media.scss file, for SASS, we're using the underscore and then media.scss. I have my code here, and then towards the bottom, I'm using the @import and then captions. So it's looking within the same folder right there. And the same thing for galleries. If you go to elements, you see I'm doing the same thing here. I have my HTML elements, and then I'm using @import to import the header.scss file, and the same thing for the tables.scss file. So it makes your code cleaner and easier to maintain. The end result is this. You have a style.scss file. This is your main file that we're working with. And then here, we have our @import variables-site variable site. So that's looking into this folder here, and then looking for this file. And then this is calling in with the @import, the colors file, typography, and columns. Now I'll do a longer demonstration of how to use SASS in a separate video because that is a huge topic as well. But for now, this is just an overview of how to get this done. So I'm going to X out of that, X out of this, X out of this. So you're going to have to make sure you know your folder structure. That's going to be very important. You want to make sure you know where your distribution folder is. You want to make sure you know where your source folder is. Like here, I have my source folder in the root of my project. In there, I have the CSS files. I have the images folder. So whenever I have any images I want to use on the site or within the theme itself, I will place them here. Then I have the JavaScript folder. And then I have my distribution folder right here. So I have the JavaScript folder right there and the images folder. So any images that I bring into the source folder there, it'll get processed and then they'll show up over here. And then in your file, we'll look over here. This is my functions.php file. If you go down here, you see I already have some of this stuff already coded out. So this is actually already used. But basically what we're doing is instead of calling in these 4 files, we would end up commenting this out or just deleting this, and we'll call in our minified style sheet over here. So the end result will be going into the SASS folder, and then we're calling in this file. So you see it'll be looking in the SASS folder and looking for the style.min.css. That will be what we get to. And the same thing for the JavaScript. Instead of calling in all these files, we're just going to be calling in this one file right here. And then we could just comment or delete all these other files. So now let's get back to the Gulpfile.js. So the first thing we're going to do is type out var for variable, or you can use const, or you can use let. I'm going to type out theme name. Now this is just a regular variable that I'm creating. Again, this is just JavaScript. Put in my single quotation marks, DevWP. Put in my semicolon. So this is so I could use it easily within this file, or I can make reference to it. So now I'll go to another line, type out var again, type out gulp, assign it the value of require gulp, just like that. Now this is telling our gulp file that we need to use gulp, and that's obvious. Now instead of doing a bunch of vars, we're just going to separate it by commas over here and go to a new line. I'll tab it over here just to align it. The next one's going to be auto prefixer. And then go to a new line. Next one will be browser sync. And then over here, I'll type out period create, then go to a new line. Right now it looks a different color because it's telling me that the variables are unused. And that's because we haven't made use of them within the file yet. So you could just disregard that. That's one of the good things about using VS Code. It gives you a lot of hints in terms of what you're doing, if it is working properly or not, if it's being used, or if you need to make any changes or corrections. All right, so now the next one, don't forget your commas at the end of them. We're going to be using reload, browser sync dot reload. Then after that, it's going to be SASS. We're going to require Gulp SASS. And then clean CSS. Same thing for SourceMaps. And then concat. Then ImageMin. Changed. Uglify. And then our line ending character. Then after this, we'll put in the semicolon. We're going to save that file. So just to recap, we'll take a look at this right here. We have our variable name DevWP right here, closed off with a semicolon to separate it. Go to a new line just to make it easier to see and read. Then we have another variable. So we have gulp require gulp separated by a comma. Going to the next line, we're requiring gulp auto prefixer, and then go to the next line, browser sync. We're using the create function there. Then we go to the next line, we have reload. Then we have gulp SASS, gulp clean CSS, gulp SourceMaps, concat, ImageMin, changed, uglify, and gulp line ending character. All right, so now we see we have that done. Now, if you look at my folder structure here, I'm doing something different. I'm doing something you might not be seeing in some other projects. I'm separating the gulp file and the package.json file into another folder, and that's a dev-gulp. So now I'm going to have to make sure that gulp knows where the actual files are that I want to work with. So what I'll do is I'll go over here to a new line. I'll create another variable, and this is going to be called root, and I'm going to assign it the value. Put in my single quotation marks. Now I'm going to want to jump up out of the dev-gulp folder. So I'll type out period, and then a /. Because if we look at the terminal, if I type out ls space dash LAH, we see the current folder is signified with a period, and the root folder is up one, and you can get there with the period. So like if I wanted to jump into the themes folder, I would do change directory space like that. And now I'm in the themes folder. And now you see when I do an ls-lah, you see all the files I have there. I'm going to go back to the dev-gulp folder. All right, so we're going to say the root folder is one level above. So we're jumping out of dev-gulp, going to the root, which is themes, the themes folder. I'll just make it a little bit shorter there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the plus operator. Now, in JavaScript, the plus operator is how you bring files or bring strings together. In PHP, you're going to use the period for that. But here we use the plus operator. So now I'm going to use my variable up here, theme name. So we don't need the single quotation marks there because it's signifying our variable. And the theme name is DevWP, which is the folder right here. And then we'll put the plus operator again, single quotation marks. Then we'll have the / there. Outside that closing single quotation marks, we'll put in our comma. We'll go to the next line. We'll tab it. Now what I want to do is create another variable. And we're using the same convention we're using up here. I'm going to type out SCSS because what I'm going to do now is inside my DevWP folder right there. I want to go into my SASS folder. So I'm going to assign it the value of root plus single quotation marks, SASS, and then /. Go to a new line. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm jumping into the root folder and then going to my SASS folder. You'll notice that the variables, you don't need to have the quotation marks. And then we'll append that string over here of the SASS folder inside single quotation marks with the plus operator. Then we'll finish off with our comma. We'll do the same thing for our JavaScript. We'll say root plus. Now we're going to want to jump into a different folder. Now for this one, we're jumping into our root folder. We're going to our source folder right here. And then we're looking for our JavaScript folder. There's a bunch of different styles on how to get this done. For the purpose of this video, I want to make it as simple and easy to understand as possible. So that's why I'm doing it this way. All right, so that's for our source files. We can also type out JS dist for our distribution folder. All right, so for this one, you probably see the pattern that I'm doing now. Going into the root folder, going into my distribution folder, then my JavaScript folder. And this one will close it off with a semicolon. We'll take that comma out. Now what I want to do is create a couple of watch files. So I'll type out var php watch files. I'm going to assign that the value of root plus. Now I'm going to use a glob pattern here. So a glob pattern is a way for you to say what you want Gulp to process. So here I'm going to use the opening and closing quotation marks. I'm going to use a double asterisk here, then a / single asterisk, period PHP. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling this variable that I wanted to process every single PHP file within the root directory and any subfolders. Because if you look here in my main project file of DevWP, I have an include folder with some other PHP files as well. So I'm using this glob pattern there. I'll go to another line. Then I want to also take a look at all my CSS files. So it's going to use the same convention. So right here I'm using, again, the root plus, and then all the SCSS files. I could have even made that more specific by using the SCSS variable here. But we could just leave it like that for now. Matter of fact, I will change that. Now I'll go to another line, create another variable. Now what I'm doing here, you might be thinking, why am I doing this? I'm creating another variable with JS source, but I already have a variable for that. Well, it's going to be for different purposes. This one I'm going to create an array. I'm going to use this variable here, paste it right there. And then what I want to do is tell Gulp concat the order that I want it to process my JavaScript files. And we'll do the same thing for the CSS in a few. But basically what I'm saying is I wanted to go into the source, go into the JavaScript folder, and there's a specific order that I want the files to be processed. Now there's a bunch of different ways to do this as well. This is just a very easy way to get it done. We're creating a variable named JS source, and it's going to be an array. And then let me just make a few of these. I believe we have 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes. All right, so now we're going to be working with these files. We're going to be working with the bootstrap bundle.js file first. Then the hover file. Then our navigation file. Our prism file. Our resize sensor. Our sticky sidebar file and the helper file. And then finally our skip, link, focus, fix file. We can leave off the trailing semicolon there, and we have to put in our semicolon there. So we took off the comma and then we put the semicolon right there. All right, so we have our 8 files that we're going to be working with. And this is for the concatenation of our files. So we'll make it just one file in total. We have the bootstrap period bundle.js, then the hover file, nav scroll, prism, resize sensor, sticky dash sidebar, the helper file, and then that one. All right, so we're going to do the same thing, but this time it's going to be for our CSS source. We'll create another array. I'll put in my semicolon there. Now for this one, we're going to use root plus, we're going to be jumping into our source folder, CSS folder, and then the different files. So I'm going to copy this 1, 2, 3 times there, and then we're going to want our style.css file there as well. So I'm going to copy this, put in our trailing comma there, and one here. And then this one is actually not within our source folder. This is in our, let me clean this up. This is in the root of our theme directory, and we have it this way because WordPress works this way. So that's what we're going to be using like that. So now we have this variable. Over here, we're going to want to make sure we call in the proper files. So this one's bootstrap.css. This one's all.css. And this one is prism.css. Save that. Our images folder, we're going to create another variable. We'll say image source, say root plus single quotation marks. We're going to go into our source folder and then our images folder. And then we're going to say all the images inside of there. And then for the destination, we'll say image dest. Just my naming convention, so don't worry about that. JavaScript is case sensitive, so you want to make sure that whatever case you're using for a variable, you stay consistent. So everybody has a different style. Some people like camel casing, some people like using underscores. Just make sure you're consistent within your process. That way you'll minimize your mistakes. All right, so here what I'm saying is I want to have this variable assign the value of root and then jump it into the source folder, into the images folder. Right now there's nothing in there, but I'll demonstrate ImageMin in a few. And then for the destination, go over here to distribution and then images right there. All right, so now we can start creating our functions. All right, so the first function I'm going to create, I'll just type out function, CSS, put in our parentheses in that manner. Our opening and closing curly brace. Inside of our opening and closing curly brace, we're going to type out return gulp.source. And then inside here, I'll say style.scss. So again, look at that. We're returning gulp.source, opening and closing parentheses, and then opening and closing brackets. SCSS, that's the variable up here. And then we're combining the file there, single quotation marks and style.scss. So that's going to process this file right here. So from there, we'll go to a new line. Now what we're going to do is we're going to type out a dot and then pipe. We're going to be piping each plugin to be used in a specific order. So the first one we're going to use is SourceMaps. We're using the pipe with the opening parentheses right there. SourceMaps is going to be inside there. We closed off the parentheses there. Put in another set of parentheses there. Now I'll put in the closing one there. So we have the pipe, opening and closing parentheses there. We have sourcemaps.init. Then inside of this set of parentheses there, we're going to put in our curly braces. And we're going to put in the load maps :true. So we're initializing our source maps. And then what we'll do, and let me bring this up a little bit, we're going to go to a new line. And now we're going to pipe another plugin over here. We're going to be using SASS. Type out SASS within the opening and closing parentheses. Put another set of opening and closing parentheses there like that. And then our opening and closing curly brace. Then go to a new line to make it easier to read. Then over here, we're going to put output style. It's going to be set to expanded. Reason why I'm doing this, we could also use compressed or compact, I believe the other one is, but I want it to be fully expanded so that way I can visually look at the file if I need to. So now after that closing quotation mark there, I'm going to go in between these two parentheses right there. And then I'm going to put in a period on parentheses. If there's an error, put in a comma there. I want to log that error. So again, we're piping the SASS function there. We're putting the output style to expanded. And then we're using the on error, sass.log error. Take a look at the code here. Make sure yours looks exactly the same. So now we'll go to a new line. Now we're going to use auto prefixer. And we're going to tell it that we want to use the last two versions. Now what this is saying is that we want to support the last two versions of browsers. Go to a new line. And now we're going to write out our source maps. Now by doing it this way, the end result is going to be that it's written directly into the compiled file. When we get into the concatenation, I'll show you how to actually create another file for that purpose. But I'm separating the functions here just to make it a little bit easier to understand the workflow. So I'll go to the end of that there, go to a new line. Now I want to make sure my line endings are fine. So I'm going to type out the pipe there with the opening and closing parentheses. Then I'm going to use my line ending corrector. And then my destination will be my final destination. I'll pipe that. Save that. All right, so what's happening here, just to recap, we created a function called CSS. We're returning gulp period source, and then we're using our CSS variable, and we're appending the style.scss file there. And then we're using the pipe function, opening and closing curly braces. We're initiating our source maps. And then we have our next pipe over here for SASS, saying the output style is going to be expanded. If there's any errors, we're going to log the error. And then we have auto prefixer. We're supporting the last two versions. And then source maps, we're writing those out. We're making sure the line endings are correct. And the destination is going to be within the root folder. And that is, again, this file right here, style.css. Your project might be different in terms of the folder structure. Since I'm using WordPress, this is the folder structure I'm using for the theme. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate those CSS files. So I'll create another function over here. So it's called concat CSS, opening and closing curly brace. Inside of there, we're going to return. And then for this one, I'm going to be using that variable up here. I'll copy that and I'll paste it in there. So pretty much what I'm doing is I'm telling concat CSS, this function that I'm creating, to use this variable array, follow this specific order. And then I'm going to go down here, use the pipe function again. We're going to use our SourceMaps.init. We're going to load maps true. And we're going to give it large file support. All right, so we have our pipe function there. We have our source maps init. Same thing we're doing up here. We're going to load maps, set that to true, put a comma there, and give it large file support and set that to true. All right, so now we're going to go down to the next line. Now we're going to pipe. We're going to use the concat function there. And we're going to say that we want the final file to be called style.min.css. So you see what we're doing here. We're calling in this array right there. We're loading our source maps, and then we're going to concatenate all those files within the source CSS folder, and we're going to rename it into style.min.css. You look at my functions file. That's the file that we're going to be using right here. And I'll uncomment this one, and I'll delete the rest of the files that I'm trying to call in over here. All right, so that's for concat. But now we also want to minify that. Now, real quick, as a sidebar, there's a bunch of different plugins you could use for Gulp itself. You could use Gulp rename. You can combine these functions into one. You can place them in the same folder if you want. There's a bunch of different ways you can get this done, but this is the way I'm doing it. Everyone has a different style. And this is just an easy way to demonstrate what's taking place. So I'll go to a new line. Use the pipe function again. Now I'm going to use clean CSS like that. And that's it. There's no parameters I'm going to put into that one. Go to the next line. Pipe sourcemaps.write. Now for this one, single quotation marks, I'm going to say keep that file within the same folder, and that's signified by the period, that's the path, /maps/. That's letting it know explicitly that it's a directory. Go to the next line. Make sure my line endings are correct. And .pipe. Take care of the destination folder. And I'll put my semicolon there. All right, so to recap, we have our concat CSS function here. We're using the Gulp source, this array right there. And then we're piping the sourcemaps.init. Then we're loading maps, true, large file, set to true. And then we're going to concatenate that and rename it into a file called style.min.css. And then we're going to minify that code. And then we're going to write the source maps into another folder, which you'll see right here. We're going to make sure the line endings are correct. And then we're going to use the destination, gulp.dest, and then the SCSS variable right there. That's the end of that function. Now let's do the same thing for our JavaScript. We're creating our JavaScript function. We're going to return this array over here because we want the concatenation of this file to be in a specific order. The order matters. So that's why we're doing it this way. So we'll go to a new line. And for this one, we're going to keep it simple. We'll pipe We use concat, and we're going to name the file DevWP.js because that's the one file we're going to be using. So that's for the concatenation. Then we want to minify it. So we use our uglify function like that. Then we go to another line, put in pipe, take care of our line endings, and then our destination. Save that. So we have our JavaScript function there. We're concatenating the files from the JS source in this specific order. Then we're going to concatenate them all. We're going to minify them. We're going to make sure the line endings are correct. And then we're going to put them within our JS dist folder, which is right over here in our distribution folder. So that's that function. Now we're going to do one for our images. So we're going to return remember, JavaScript is case sensitive, so you want to make sure you're using the correct case for the variable you created. And now what we'll do is we'll pipe the changed function. So this is going to look for any changes. So we'll type out changed. Then we'll have it run like that. Then we'll go to a new line. We'll pipe the ImageMin function itself. So I typed out pipe, parentheses, ImageMin, opening parentheses, the closing one's down there, then the opening square bracket, because we're going to give it some parameters over here. We're going to say ImageMin for GIFs, if we're going to have any GIFs. We're going to say interlaced, set that to true. Put a comma. I'm going to copy that line, put it there like that. This, I'll rename it to JPEG tran. Then type out progressive over here. Set that to true. And then for this one, for the PNGs, we're going to say the optimization level. We're going to set that to 5. All right, let me make sure I have that correct. We're using the pipe function, then the ImageMin function. We have our array over here of the various parameters. We're using the ImageMin.GIFsicle. That's for GIFs, interlaced, set to true. Then for JPEG tran, progressive, true. And then for the PNGs, optimization level, 5. This closes off that parentheses right there. You want to make sure that you have all your opening, closing, parentheses, and brackets where they need to be. And then I'll use pipe, gulp.dest, send it to my destination folder. All right, so now what we're going to do is create a watch function, because what happens with Gulp is if you don't create a watch task or a default watch task, you're going to have to type out the process each and every time. And we want to automate this as much as possible. So we'll create another function and call it watch. And inside there, we're going to be using browser sync. We're going to initialize that. Put in our opening and closing parentheses like that. In our curly braces, then go to a new line. So what I'll do now is inside here, I'm going to say open in an external. This is for the external tab itself. And you'll see this in the browser. Then we're going to say proxy. And what's going to happen here is you're going to have to use the URL within your local server that it's going to use for the proxy itself. So in my case, I'll put in http:// localhost / and dev. Yours will likely be different. You could use the same name if you want, but if you already have a local server running, you will put in that URL address here. Then I'm going to say port 8080. Close that off over there. Now, I'm still within these curly braces right here, but I'm going after the browser sync.init. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say gulp.watch, parentheses. What I want to do is I want to watch that variable that I had before. And then I'm going to say gulp.series. Use a series function, CSS, and then concat CSS. So I'm going to be watching the style watch files. That's this variable up here, this one right here. So I'm going to go to new line. Then I'll do gulp.watch. I'm going to say JS source for the JavaScript function. Then gulp.watch for the image source for the ImageMin testing. And then the last one here is going to be gulp.watch parentheses. I'm going to say I want to watch the PHP files. So I'll copy that variable, bring it down here. I'll use a comma. Then JS dist plus DevWP.js. Make sure you have your quotation marks because that is a string. Then a comma. Then style.min.css. Then I'm going to go outside of that closing parentheses right there. .on change. Then browser sync.reload. So pretty much I'm just going to be reloading the browser when any of these files change. So let's take a look at this again, this function. We have the function called watch. Then we're initializing browser sync to open up in an external tab. We're using a proxy for that. We're using port 8080. Then we're using our 4 gulp commands over here. First is for the style watch files, running in a series. First is going to be CSS, and then it's going to be concat CSS. And then we're using the same thing for JavaScript, the variable, and then the function. Then our image source function. Then we're also watching our PHP watch files, the DevWP.js file, the style.min.css file. Notice the quotation marks where they need to be. Then outside of this parentheses, .on, then change, comma, browser sync.reload. But now we have to export these functions, because if not, they're not going to work, and we'll get an error within our terminal. So we're going to type out exports.css, and that's exporting the CSS function we created before. So I'm just going to copy that there. Do the same thing for our concat CSS function. Do the same thing for our JavaScript. Then same thing for our watch function. So we'll copy that. And same thing for our ImageMin. And then we'll create our variable build. Gulp.parallel. We're going to be using our watch function in there. And then we'll say gulp.task default build. So what we're doing here is we're saying that whenever you type out gulp within the terminal, it's going to process the watch function, everything here. And it'll go through all of our functions within this file. So let's recap this file real quick, make sure we have everything correct. We have our theme name variable. We have the various plugins we're using for Gulp. Auto prefixer, browser sync, SASS, clean CSS, SourceMaps, concat, ImageMin, changed, uglify, line ending corrector. Then we have our root variable. We have our SCSS variable. We have our JS variable and our distribution variable. We're watching all of our PHP files and we're watching all of our SCSS files. Then we have our JavaScript source files. This is an array. Then we have our CSS source files in an array as well. Then we have our images, the source and the destination. Then we have our CSS function using SourceMaps, SASS, expanded. We're logging the errors. We're using auto prefixer, SourceMaps.write, using line ending corrector. And then the destination will be root for that file. Then here we're using our concat CSS function. The source is going to be this variable here and processed in that order. So we're initiating our source maps. We're concatenating the files and naming them style.min.css. We're minifying them. Then we're writing our maps into a new folder using our line ending corrector and our destination. Then we have our JavaScript function. We're using that array. We're going to concatenate all those files. There's about 8 of them within that folder. We're going to rename them into DevWP.js. That's just one file. Then we're going to minify them. We're going to use the line ending corrector. And then we're going to put it within our JS distribution folder, which is right there. Then for the images, we have our source, our destination. We're using the ImageMin plugin. These are the parameters we're using. And then the destination folder. Then we have our watch function. Here we're initializing browser sync. We're going to open up in an external tab. We're using a proxy. And we're using port 8080. Then we have our gulp.watch. Over here, we're watching the style watch files. And then we're running the series to do CSS first and then concat CSS. And then we're doing the same thing for our JavaScript files. Then our images. And then we're watching the PHP files. And then the devwp.js file. And then the style.min.css file. We're watching them for changes. And if they change, we're going to reload the browser. And then we have to export our functions. So we're doing it this way. And then we're doing our task over here of default build. This is the build variable. Gulp.parallel watch. All right, now let's see how all this works. I'm going to open up my terminal here. But first what I'm going to do is go here. Actually, let me reduce that. I'm going to comment out these lines right here. I'm going to uncomment this line right here because I'm just going to be calling in the one file. Then I'm going to go down here. I'm going to comment out these files here. And I'm going to uncomment this one file here. So now instead of calling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 files, we're just going to be calling in these two. That will make our website perform significantly better. And this is a lot easier to maintain. All right, so let me open up my terminal. Make sure I'm in that root folder. Let me bring this here. Remember, if we look towards the bottom, we have all these files we're calling in currently. I haven't reloaded the browser yet, so that's why this is still working. Let me put this on the side and then put the editor on the other side. Let me close off the Explorer. Doing it this way so you could see the changes. So now what I'll do is I'll type out the gulp command. And then I'll hit enter. It's going to start the process. You see it started the default task, watch, using the proxy localhost. And these are the local and external URLs. What this means is if you go into your iPhone or Android phone or any computer or laptop connected to your network, you can go to this URL and you'll be able to see it right within your phone. Now let's see what happens here. If I go to, let me open this up. If I want to inspect the elements here, so let's say I want to quickly change this color of the nav bar. I can see where it's located at. And the way I do that is if you look down here within the console, we go to nav bar, see the background color. We see it's located within the menus.scss file on line 19. So now let's go to that file. We'll go back over here, hover over it. Notice the path. SASS maps, that's signifying the maps folder. But you're going to disregard that maps name because you're going to go into the navigation folder and then underscore menus.scss. Navigation, menus. All right, so we see it's correct on line 19. If you're not seeing this over here in this manner in terms of the source maps, then you're going to have to go into settings in your developer tools. And then you're going to want to find the section that says enable CSS source maps. So you're going to want to enable that. If this is not checked, then this won't work. So in your developer tools, make sure this is checked off. And another tip is to make sure you disable cache while in the developer tools, because sometimes there might be some cache issues. So I'm going to go to that line. I'm going to copy it. and then I'm just going to say red. I'm going to save that. It's going to process it. You see it being processed down here, and then it automatically reloaded the browser. I didn't have to click reload. I didn't have to go into separate files. And now if we look over here, let me make this bigger real quick. And now in terms of my files, we're using the minified CSS file here. So this is Bootstrap combined with Font Awesome, combined with Prism, combined with my own styles that I added to the theme itself. Things of that nature. It's all concatenated into one file instead of having all separate files. And then orders it within the order that I put in that array. And now if we go to the bottom of that page, in terms of my JavaScript files, you see I'm only calling in that one file instead of the 8 files. Some of the other stuff is already called in from WordPress itself, but in terms of my JavaScript, instead of 8 files, now I'm calling in just one file, and it's all minified. And this has all been automated by using Gulp and NodeJS. This is a streamlined workflow. Now this will save you a significant amount of time when it comes to developing. It'll make your website more performant. And while it is an advanced way to code, this workflow is ideal. Let me go back over here. I'll comment that out. I'll save that. You see it's being processed again, and it automatically reloaded itself. Now, let me just delete that there. Let me go to a JavaScript folder. Let me go here. Let's say I'm going to go back to here. So here I have it at 300, right? So if we go here, let's go back to the bottom, open this up. I'm just going to find 300, and it hasn't processed yet because we haven't changed that file. So, because we ended up doing that before when I demonstrated in the beginning of changing the values. So now if I save this, it'll process the JavaScript file. It'll reload. As you see over here in the browser, it's reloading. Let me X out of this one. Let me look at the page source. Go back down to the bottom. And I'm going to find 400. See, we have 2 right there. Scroll top, 400 right here. Put that back to 3 for 300. It'll reload the browser. Open this up this time. 300. So that's working. So now we know our CSS is working. We know our JavaScript is working. What about PHP? All right. So what I'll do now is let me go over here to my folder structure. Here, I'm going to go to the header right here. I'll go to the header file. I'm going to go down below the header tag. I'm just going to say H1. And close that off. Then I'll save it. It'll start reloading the browser. And let's see if that works. And it did. It automatically reloaded the browser. You saw it said browser sync connected. And then it automatically injected the hello world text. Now let me get rid of that. And now that's gone. All right, so that's really good. So now we know our CSS is working. We know our SASS is working. We know our JavaScript is working. And we know that Gulp is processing our PHP files as well. What about images? All right, so now let me open up my file explorers. I'll bring this one right here. It's going to start getting cramped in my window. But let's say I wanted to take an image from one of these. Let me see, what's this one here? Go into the JPEGs. Let me view that in a larger icon set. These are some images I took of the holidays. Let's say I'm going to take this file right here. If we look at the properties, we see this is about 9 megabytes. If I go into my source folder, into my images folder here, let me copy this file and then bring it into this folder. Let's see if our image function is going to work. We see starting image, Gulp ImageMin minified one image, saved 14.2%. And it took about almost 2 seconds to do that. Now let's see if it relocated that file, that image, to the right location. And it's right there now. Before there was nothing here, now there is. Just to show you that again, let's try a different image. Let me copy this image here. We see ImageMin is processing that again. And automatically, it's bringing it in over here into our distribution folder. All right, so that's good. Now we have Gulp working. We have it working for our SASS files, which converts everything to CSS. We have it working for our JavaScript. We have it working for PHP and for our images as well. Let me bring this over here. I could make this larger again. Go back here to our Gulp file. Make that smaller. This is our end result Gulp file. This is the package.json file. And this is our folder structure. So now we just automated a lot of our workflow. We improved the performance of our website or web page based on the fact that we're reducing the HTTP requests from like 11 files down to like just 2. And we're minifying our code as well. Now, this is a updated video to a previous video I did before on how to use Gulp, but this is for Gulp 4.0. This is a major update, and a lot of the ways we did things in the previous versions of Gulp do not work in this version. That's why we had to redo this. All right, so let's look at the final product. Make this bigger again. This is a theme that I'm working on. It's a WordPress training theme. It's to help people code their own custom WordPress theme. It has a lot of built-in functionality like the sticky sidebar. It's using Font Awesome, the latest version of Font Awesome, with the icon set. Using Bootstrap, but with some custom code. I have the hover effect over here, which is not typical. And another thing that's not typical is the clickable top level link. Normally that would be a disabled link, but it works with the code that I'm using. We also have some features here like the embedded code right over here. Easy copy to clipboard. That's using Prism. We have various layouts. And this is the markups and formatting, so you can see how each of the various tags are going to be formatted within the browser. All right, so if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my channel on YouTube and hit the notification icon. I create a bunch of videos on how to code custom WordPress themes, how to code plugins, videos on how to upload to Instagram from your computer, full stack web development, WordPress multi-site, and more. I have a bunch of playlists that you can check out over here. And if there's any changes to Gulp or Node, make sure to look in the cards in the upper right hand corner and down in the description area, because I'll leave a comment to any updates or any new videos, take care of any issues you might face. And I'll be sharing the code for this Gulp file on my website, pixelweb.com. I'll leave a link to that file or that article in the description area down below. So definitely check that out. I hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, smash that notification icon, and leave your comments down below. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.